What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor Podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. Athletor Podcast coming at you. This week's guest is Pitt head coach Keith Gavin, and we talked to Keith a lot about the way that he bends the sport to fit his athletes, the same way he bent the sport to fit himself when he was an athlete. We also talked a little bit about NIL money, where it's coming from, where it's going. And also, I think you'd be really surprised to hear what Keith Gavin would do with wrestling with a magic wand. All that and more coming up on the Athletor Podcast. Athletor Podcast, Keith Gavin, thank you so much for coming on today, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, dude, you guys are good at wrestling, as it turns out, at Pitt. You guys are really good at wrestling.
Yeah, well, we're trying to be. So, hopefully we continue to get better at it.
Okay, and I said that overarching blanket statement for a reason. So much goes into creating or building an NCAA Division I team from scratch. So when you took over at Pitt, what was the line items that you needed to address immediately after taking the reins?
Yeah, well, I mean, the benefit was it wasn't completely from scratch. I mean, we did have some guys that were pretty good right away, and so it was just kind of filling the team in around them. So that was nice. But it rapidly changed what you needed to do because we ran into, maybe my third year, COVID hits, right? So that's crazy, and then did NIL. And now with all this stuff we're dealing with now, so I feel like every year it's just been changing, at least as of late. But initially, it's like you just kind of you're trying to get kids that want to see how good they can be at wrestling, and that's what so like everybody says, you're trying to build your culture, and essentially that's the culture that you're trying to build, and it takes time to do that the right way. But once you do, then you feel like, all right, now we got some guys that we could work with and get them better. And that's the most fun part about the job is you find kids that have a true passion for it, and then you help them.
Okay. You say building a culture the right way. Where do you start with that? When you recruit a kid, even if they're number one in the country and they don't really fit in,
Mm-hmm.
do you tell them to kick rocks?
Well, we weren't getting the number one guy in the country when I got here, so
Right.
it's like, no, we didn't have to worry about that. So, but it's like, that's what makes it harder because the number one guy, it's rare that guy is not the right fit, right? He's number one for a reason. So everybody knows that, I mean, you look at the kids now who are the top dogs. It's like uh, people aren't wondering if they like wrestling, So what you have to do is you get the other guys and the ones that you can, okay, can this guy develop in college and can I help him get better? And what you're looking for is, do they really like wrestling? Like, do they like the sport in itself, or do you just like getting the recognition you get from winning?
Mm.
That's a big difference, and it's hard to sniff that out.
What are the red flags then? Because I can see it. I can see
Yeah.
kids that are good at wrestling, but they don't love it. There are ones in
Hmm.
our room, right? So what are the red
Hmm.
flags that you're looking for? Because you're not in the room with these high school kids every day. You don't get to see them, how
Right.
excited they are for warm-ups or how excited they are to wrestle some nobody
Yeah.
team next door.
Yeah, it is the benefit of our location being at Pitt is we are around a lot of good guys, so we do get, or a lot of talent, I should say. So we do get to see that. Like we go out to the clubs that are in the area, or they come to our RTC practices in the summer, and we can kind of we've been especially recently getting some guys that maybe other people didn't see coming yet, and but we kind of knew just from being around them a lot. So that's a benefit. I mean, every school has a benefit or a pro to it, when it comes to recruiting, and that's ours, is that we
Mhm.
are able to, because you see it the other way too. where, man, everybody thinks this kid's good, but I don't know if this is going to pan out.
Mm.
And we passed on a few of those. Thankfully, I have. And then nobody bats 1,000 in recruiting. We've also, made mistakes, but you learn from it. And I think the red flags are like,
hey, don't go anywhere. It's Mike. We'll get back to the podcast in just a second. We got to pay the bills though. Do you have an athlete that's looking to break into the social media space? We at athletorlive.com have a brand new in-depth tutorial done by none other than Caden Henshaw. If you don't know who Caden is, he's not even a Division I wrestler, yet he's got hundreds of thousands of engaged followers. Learn how to create engaging content, grow your followers, and open up new opportunities in the NIL space. Go to athletorlive.com/Caden and we'll give you the first module completely free.
when the kid's, dodging competition. Maybe he's got another really good guy in the state and he sucks a bunch of weight to avoid that guy. You know what I mean? And it's not for the team. It's not for anything like that. It's just because you're trying to get that title and you don't want to wrestle that guy. We want the guys that they're trying to wrestle the best kids that they can. So that's a big piece of it. I think the way that you compete, if you're trying to score early and just hang on in high school, that's only going to get worse in college. Yeah, just some things like that, that you try to sniff out and in the recruiting process.
That seventh minute tells a lot. Like,
Yeah, and it's just really hard to change somebody once they get to college because they probably were rewarded for wrestling that way, and so then it's if you we're used to trying to get early points and then hang on or try not to make a mistake and you win a lot because you ride everybody out. That's not changing when you get to college and really like it's our job to kind of help you get better at that. We'd be wasting our time trying to get a kid that never shot to shoot more.
Yeah. So if you could put a circle around the Pitt Wrestling brand right now, what do you want it to be and what do you think it is right now?
That's a good question. I mean, what it is like this is a place where it is it's a very, it's a blue collar place where you're going to get a lot of kids that maybe are, and this is what we try to do in recruiting too, like back to the other question, you try to get kids that are on a positive, like a good trajectory coming out of, and we've almost everybody that's been successful at our program has done that, myself, I was never a state champion, and then I won a national title here. Nino Bonacorsi just won a national title here. He was never a state champion. Before me, Pat Santoro won twice here, and he never won a state title. So it's kind of you have a lot of that, I think, at in this area or at Pitt. And then what we're trying to do is like we try to be, this isn't a one size fits all. Like we try to get these kids and tell them like, look, we're going to meet you where you're at, and then help you develop without killing your ingenuity. I think that is kind of what we're really trying to do here. And what I'd like the brand to be is like, I don't know if I necessarily want some specific style of wrestling. I want to be, anybody. We could work with a lot of different people. Because again, that's the favorite part. That's my favorite part of the job. Is my favorite part as an athlete is trying to figure it out. And I look at coaching as like I get to figure it out for all these other kids that are on the team. So,
Dude, that was the perfect answer coming from you. Simply because, no, and I say that honestly because big fan of yours, a guy named Mark Fitzgerald, good friend of mine. He has always loved watching you wrestle, and not that I didn't, but I just I've never put these things together. He's like, now Mark never wrestled in high school, but his kids got into it, right? And he started competing at like veteran stuff, in his 30s just to like be relatable to his kids, which I thought was
yeah,
super awesome. Like
yeah,
that's
it's
not
awesome.
many people do that. Like that's
Yeah,
not easy, right?
yeah, that's cool.
But one of the things that he said was Keith Gavin, and he calls you Captain Lunch Pail. He's like, the dude just puts his hard hat on, grabs his lunch pail, and goes to work every 6 minutes, and And what he said was he goes, Keith Gavin makes me think that if I spend 30 years doing this, or 20, whenever you ended your career,
Hmm.
25, 27 years doing this, I can be a national champion. Now, whether that's true or not is irrelevant, but one of the things that I think he's hearkening to is your ability to problem solve in matches. I've seen you go low level attack. I've seen you
Hmm.
go upper body attack. I've seen
Hmm.
you not shoot for an entire 6 minutes,
Yeah.
because that's what the person in front of you dictated, right?
Hmm.
So where does that type of situational intelligence come from?
I think that for one, I wrestled a lot. Like it was like it was my favorite thing to do, so I did it all the time. Even in high school in the off season, I was getting better every year. I wasn't some blue chip recruit, but I wrestled a ton of matches, especially in the off season. And then yeah, and so I always kind of had that, like, I just enjoyed kind of trying to figure it out. That was my favorite part about the sport. And then just the coaches I was around. I was just very fortunate to kind of gel with coaches that didn't tell me, like, no, you can't do that. That will never work. And my coaches when I was here at Pitt, I mean, they just kind of let me, a lot of trial and error. And I had a lot of I was just very lucky, to be around the people that I was around here. When I first got to Pitt, they had Carl Fraunhofer?
Braunhofer, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he was runner up my senior year of high school, and so I came in. He was stuck around, was coaching, and he was like my workout partner, and he had that kind of. He's a very intelligent guy, but I had that
He's
kind of
out
figure.
my way now, isn't he? Isn't he
Yeah,
out?
he's doing the Beat the Streets LA stuff.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. But
Sorry.
no, yeah, he's awesome. But so he helped me out a ton, just the way that he looked at the sport, and is very hands-on with me. So again, I just lucked into that stuff. And yeah, and then I just watched a ton of wrestling because I was trying to, like when I was coming out, everybody was trying to do um Kale Sanderson. Everybody's trying to be like Kale, and trying to move a lot, hands and feet, do ankle picks, and I would try that, and I couldn't. I was I'm not the most athletic guy, believe it or
Right.
not. So
Which is one of the reasons that Fitzy says he thinks he can be you in 30 years.
yeah, yeah. So I think I kind of learned through just watching some other people and being like, oh, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of skin this cat, and I could figure this out. And I think that's what's cool about wrestling is um, you kind of work with what you're given, and that again, that's what we try to do as coaches is like, especially once we get the kids, once they're in college. I mean, they're 18 years old, and um, they've already had a lifetime of developing their strengths and weaknesses. So we have to make their strengths stronger and then kind of eliminate weaknesses. We can't say, no, this is the way we're going to do it here, and you got to scrap all that, right? Because
Yeah,
you just
that's
don't have enough
really
time.
tough. It's tough
Yeah,
to do in 5 years. Like,
yeah, you don't have enough time.
right. Okay. So follow up to those last two questions. Number one, who were you watching specifically that gave
Mhm.
you the idea, like, oh, there's a whole lot of different ways that I can do that? And then C, how do you go about doing it? Was it just play wrestling? Did you drill the heck? Like, what was your process to,
Yeah.
because I know like Satiev
Uh-huh.
for me was like, oh, because I wasn't any good, but as a wrestler, I just enjoyed learning, right?
Yeah.
And so as I started getting older, I'm like, I couldn't do the stuff that I did when I was a kid. But I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, if I watch Satiev, he can score without touching the legs, like a lot,
Hmm.
like 15
Yeah.
different ways, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm not going to get out on leg attacks on college kids anymore. That shit just hurts. Like,
Yeah.
so who were you watching and how did you implement it?
I think, well, there's a lot of influences I had, and some like it wasn't like it is now, where you could just, watch every match from the World Championships. It was hard to find.
Mhm.
Um, so I got exposed to that stuff when I was in college. I remember Sonny Abe used to help me a lot, and he told me one time he was like, like, because I was trying to get lower in my stance, and he's like, you don't have to do that. Like these European guys are bent over at the back, and all that. And I was like, I don't want to wrestle like some European guy, like I just assumed they were all soft, but uh, and then I start watching that stuff, and I was like, oh my, and like, yeah, like you mentioned Sativ, and he was like a string bean, and was
Yeah.
crushing people, and it's like, okay, so that opened my eyes. I watched a VHS tape of Dave Schultz, and that was a big deal for me. Like I thought, man, I could do that, So I stole a lot of stuff from Dave Schultz. Um, I mentioned like at the time everybody's trying to be like Kale, because Sanderson he was the hottest wrestler in the world. But I remember in 2003 he lost to that Sajidov guy from Russia, and that was very similar to what I saw Dave Schultz wrestle. And I was like, man, this guy hardly moves at all. And he has a lot of like very good positioning, and that's like, I could focus on that. I could focus on just being disciplined in my stance and my positioning, and that could be my thing, and so, yeah, seeing that stuff and then just kind of opening your eyes to, there's a lot of different ways to do it and then finding like what suits you.
Okay. But like when, let's say you saw Dave's front headlock, let's just say,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
How do you take that from what you see on that VHS tape to
Yeah.
the room? And then more importantly, how do you turn it into something that you can actually do in a live situation with a whistle and a
Hmm.
singlet and a scoreboard?
Yeah, I think so. It almost never goes where like you see it, even if someone teaches this to you. I found this to be true, is that you almost never do it like if you get to work for it, it's almost never exactly like you saw or someone
Right.
taught it to you. There's a trial and error process, and then you make it your own. And so that's how almost everything has been for me. It's like I'll see the front headlock and I'm like, I'm gonna try that, and then I'd come up with something, um, like some little adjustment that worked for me in certain situations. And I think just in general, that's probably how our sport and probably all combat sports continue to evolve, as people doing that, and then. Um, yeah, so I think that I mean, when Askren was doing that assassin thing, I mean, I remember seeing Dave Schultz did that,
Yeah.
but Askren made it a little bit different and did it in a little different setup, right? So yeah, I think it's just like you see it, you try it, and then you just keep making like little adjustments to it, little tweaks to it, and until you can come up with something off of that.
How much of your now, I'm just going to assume, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but you allow your athletes the same creativity in the wrestling room. Is that about right?
Yeah, I try to. It depends on the kid a lot. It is difficult. It's more difficult than I thought it would be to do that when in coaching because like again, some kids are just that's just not how they're wired, and you got to figure out how that works. And then you also there's a balance of like there's a lot of creativity in it and you got to make it your own, but there are some non-negotiable principles that you have to have. You know what I mean? And it's like we can't skip these steps. And so that's currently with our team, we're kind of really, focusing on a lot of that. Like right now, today, we're just doing like, you just can't give up ground when you're on your feet. We can't be giving up head position and then fighting our way back in the center like that can't, no matter what your style is, you have to control the map.
Mm.
So there's certain things like that we have to make sure that we handle as a team. And then we do a lot of individuals where that's like where we're working with the guy in his own areas of concentration. So it's a little bit of both.
Mm. So you're saying, and that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way because it could change from year to year, right? Like
Hmm.
you don't have Bonaccorsi in the room anymore, right?
Right.
So it's
Hmm.
like, maybe you give him a little bit more freedom or lead
Yeah.
than you would an incoming freshman.
Yeah.
How do you like justify give aside from, hey, this kid knows what he's doing. He's fifth year
Hmm.
senior. He knows what he's
Right.
aside from that, how do you go about dictating how much kids get kind of freedom and leeway in their practice time?
Um, yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that a lot of it for me comes down to you know the kid and you know how bad he wants it. And I think that that's a big deal because if you do it for all, like we have 30 guys on the team now, if you do it for all 30, it's unrealistic to think that all 30 are going to have the same level of desire to be the best at wrestling. right? So what you're going to end up with is a couple of really good ones, but a pretty bad dual meet team. And because you're going to have some guys that just are skipping steps, because they just won't do it. This is not important enough to them. Now, we want in the recruiting process, everybody wants to have 30 guys that are just killers, right? And that's all they want to do. So you're trying to constantly add to that. But I don't know if anybody has that,
Right.
So yeah, it's got to be individualized. It's got to come down to like you said, the maturity of it. That's a big piece. Like this kid's pretty mature, so we're gonna let him do his thing, and then I'm gonna work with him just in his areas, right? Because I know he's gonna handle all the other stuff. And then there's just a level of desire that the kid has.
Interesting. All right. Man, you brought up 30 kids on the roster. Well, I guess you're prepping for August, huh? But
yeah,
how do you see things shaping up right now in the current landscape of the NCAA? Because we're in a wonky time, man.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's just so much uncertainty. Like this settlement hasn't even passed yet. I think it's going to happen in April. And it gets talked about. I mean, we're talking about it every week with the administration. And it's been, I mean, so much. We think this is going to happen. Then I don't know if that, and here's what we're going to do. Maybe we won't. There's so much uncertainty. Anybody that comes out and tells you like this is what's going to happen, that they're lying. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
So it's a scary time because uncertainty, I think, is scary. And everybody's trying to look ahead, and which you have to do. But nobody knows for sure.
Yeah, it's and especially as quickly as things are changing, right? I mean, if I would have told you, what, 7 years ago when you took the job, was it 7 years ago?
Yeah.
7 years ago when you took the job, that you'd be coaching through through a pandemic,
I
and
know.
also you have to pay kids, and also you have to worry about a 30-man roster cap, and also you got to worry about rev sharing.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot. That's a whole lot. Like to do one to change one of those things is a lot, right? Like the pandemic, the rev share, the NIL, the whatever.
Yeah. I mean, not that long ago, it would be illegal for me to like give a guy a ride home,
Yep.
from practice because it's an extra benefit.
Yeah.
Now it's like we could just give him money. It's crazy. Like how fast that's changed is wild, right? So, and nobody sees that coming. That's why it's like I said, the uncertainty is scary because of who knows what's next. And obviously everybody's concerned about the survival of the sport in general at the collegiate level. And you hear a lot of people say this is what we need to do. And yeah, I mean we probably have to do something, but it's hard to pinpoint what's coming.
What are you hearing we need to do? Like when the coaches from the ACC get around the horn and talk, what are they saying? Hey, if we don't do this, we could be in some trouble.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, everybody talks about attendance as a big one, right? Is it making sure that you have people that are supporting your program, right? That make it that way it's difficult to just get rid of it or not support it to the level that it needs to be supported. Also, everybody's always talking about like we got to endow, your scholarships and endow the coaching positions, and that's not a quick fix. That's a
No.
lot. That's a lot of money. And so, yes, we should be, working towards that. But to throw that out there is like, oh, just go get that done. It's like, well, that's going to take
Just
time.
120 million? Oh, is that
Yeah,
all?
yeah.
Sorry.
Like that's going to take a little time, right? So,
And you know what's funny is like there are forward thinkers out there. You
mhm,
mentioned Pat Santoro.
mhm,
To me, he's one of the best coaches in the NCAA that
yeah,
not enough people talk about, right? The
mhm,
dude is, first of all, aces as a human being.
right,
Secondly, he he seems to be pretty forward thinking in
mhm,
terms of like, okay, I know where I want to leave this place when I'm done. And if I want to ensure that it's not going to be in any way jeopardized, I have to have full endowment.
yeah,
Like you said, the dude's been working on this for a decade, right?
yeah,
Like this is not oh, let's just figure out a way to raise $120 million from one guy or this person or that person.
mhm,
Now that might be the case at some places, okay? That might
yeah,
be the case, but for the most part, for every other Captain Lunch Pail out there, that's a process, man. That is a process. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because you also that's for the future, of your program, but you also need money for right now, and
those are two separate funds, by the way, that people don't recognize. Those are two separate things.
Yeah, like NIL is real in wrestling, and it's if you're not doing it, you cannot win at a high level, and so that's what's difficult is like, all right, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna raise all this money to endow that, and then put off your winning right now, or so it's hard, but you got it. There's a lot of different buckets that you got to raise money for now. You got to raise it to make sure your program's in a good spot. You got to raise it for NIL. You got to raise it for your RTC to because that's important as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different areas to a lot of different buckets you got to fill.
Yeah, there is, and I do not envy your job at all.
Yeah.
At all, man.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining though, because it is I do get to coach wrestling for a living, so I'm grateful for that. It's just like you said, it's changed fast, and I don't know if anybody really saw all this coming, but you just you just kind of figure it out, and we're pretty good at that as a community of figuring.
I agree with that. We are good. Well, we're cockroaches. Let's be completely honest. You can't.
Yeah, we're good survivalists. Yeah.
For sure. So I do, in those terms, have faith that our sport will survive at a college level. Now it might look different in the next 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years. I'm pretty sure it will.
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to be in some way thriving. You brought up NIL and you brought up it's a real thing. But how real, right? Like I know you're hearing the same numbers that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Bo Bassett getting $5 million over 5 years. Are these numbers real? Is that real numbers? I don't
know. I have no idea. I mean, I hear the same thing you are, but I don't have any way of confirming or denying. And also, I'm not going to waste my time worrying about it because I'm not going to do that. Like we just can't do that, So It's like I can't be like. Yeah, I think it's funny when you hear this happens in football all the time. I feel like where they're like, we just need more money, and it's like, but it's never going to be enough. And it's like if you have a lot of money, Ohio State football is just going to spend more, or you know what I mean. So it's just it can't just be about that, If you're trying to get your program from point A to point B, you got to find a different way to do it. So I try not to worry about like, oh, this program has this and we don't have it. And I mean, we have NIL money, but it's not going to be something crazy like that,
Yeah, no, I understand. And from what I understand, the way that NIL is going to be distributed will be different. Those collectives are going away. Is that correct?
I don't know. That's something that I think is yes, that's being talked about. They're saying like, if it's over a certain amount, it has to go through some like a clearinghouse type of thing, but I don't know how that's gonna get that seems like a lot of work and how are they gonna keep track of everything for all the sports? So yeah, that's one thing that's in the settlement. I know that, but I don't I'm skeptical of whether or not that's actually gonna happen.
What are you certain will change with NIL over the next whatever it is, 6 months or so?
I don't know if anything's really going to change with NIL over the next 6 months. I think that what they're probably going to try to do is like put it more control on like
The institution.
football that is trying to, they're spending crazy amount. I don't know if they're going to be looking at some wrestling program and saying like, hey, that guy's not, you shouldn't give him that. You know what I mean? It's going to be more of that stuff. But honestly, I don't know. I mean, I bet there's going to be workarounds no matter what they do.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure there will be. Again, we're good at that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's turn to this year's season, postseason. You checked off the first check mark as a newer head coach is having your first national champion. You got that. How are you building upon that, and how do you kind of define success now that Bonacorsi's gone?
Well, you build upon that. It helps a lot with recruiting, right? So we're starting to see the benefits of that. Because when you first get here, again, you're trying to build a culture the way you want and get the kids that, really want to be here and that kind of thing. But, you have to also, to get the really good guys, you got to show that you know what you're doing too. And so, we had a few years ago, we had, when Nino was second place at 197, we had Jake Wenzel second place at 165 in the same year. And I think we were 11th place that year in the NCAA. And so that was a big deal. And that led to a good recruiting class. And then Nino winning, helps show like, all right, these guys can help you develop and get better and win nationals here. So just in the practical sense with recruiting, it's helpful. And you build upon it in that way, because you're always trying to get kids that are more ready-made, than when they get here, like more physically ready, more, have a higher pedigree, because those are easier to kind of, you start winning right away. So that's how you build off of that. But yeah, as far as defining success, it's just, I think helping kids reach their full potential is what it is. I mean, if you have a guy and like this guy could win, and so if we get him, that's our job, to help this guy win. And I think that is how we kind of really define it in that way. As a team, next step, like I said, we're 11th. Next step is breaking into that top 10. And then, once you do that, you're going to be trying to break into that top 5, and then, you're hunting for a trophy. But that's kind of the natural progression when it comes to goals. But honestly, that's not really something that we talk about a whole lot. It's more just like the day-to-day stuff of like, we're just trying to get better today, and then the wins and losses kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you talk like, but you do have to set goals like on a yearly basis, I'd assume. Do you sit down with your coaches and go, okay, here's what this kid needs, and here's how he can get to the point where he's contending for a national title? How often do you sit down with your coaches and talk about a big long-term picture?
Yeah, those conversations are happening all the time, especially at the individual level with our guys, whether he's a guy in the lineup or he's a guy in red shirt that we're counting on in the future. Um, each time they compete, it's like an evaluation, and I tell the kids this too, like when they compete, it's just, you're just getting real feedback, and now you take that and okay, here's what's going well for me, here's what's not, and here's how I'm going to go about getting better from that. And then we do that as coaches too, to try to help them. We're looking at it of saying like, all right, here's what's going well for this guy, here's where he gets beat, how are we going to fix this, and yeah, it's a very collaborative approach in that way. But those kind of things are happening all the time, and especially after competition.
Got it. As a kid comes in to your program, or let's, this isn't your first coaching gig.
Hmm.
As you see high school seniors become college freshmen, what either skill set or in their wrestling is most deficient most often? I know each kid is different, I get that, but as
Hmm.
a blanket statement, where do you see the biggest deficiency in young athletes as they get to an NCAA level?
From technical standpoint, a lot of it is getting off the bottom, right? Because you're just rewarded more in college for keeping a guy down. So just really like the stingy stuff is like finishing your single leg, like finishing your attacks. That's where they got to get better, because most of the guys you wrestled probably in high school just didn't have the same level of um, athleticism, fight, whatever you want to say, So those things. You're not getting away with things like coming out of your stance as often, and controlling the center of the mat, like we said. So a lot of little stuff like that. Mentally, it's a lot of just, if you have a guy coming in that's used to winning all the time in high school, and then he takes some losses, that goes back to what we're saying, like you got to have somebody that really, you're trying to get somebody that really loves to compete and really loves wrestling for wrestling, like for the sake of doing it, rather than just getting the recognition they get for winning. That makes it easier to get over that. But that's the biggest mental hurdle is man, this guy wasn't used to losing, and now he has, 5 losses in the first semester,
Yeah. How
so
does he
that's
react to that? How does he react to I remember getting ridden like a rented mule
Yeah.
for a full season.
Yeah.
Like that, I was not used to that. I was
hmm
not used to that. And
hmm
so how do you get a kid who's used to being the star athlete at their high school to maybe put their ego aside and say,
Yeah.
you're still gonna have to get a lot better, bud.
Yeah, it's just that. It's like you got to kind of you got to get rid of that ego, And I think that just helping them develop the awareness and the understanding of, look, the guys that you wrestled in high school, I'd guess probably 95% of those guys, they don't wrestle anymore. They're not doing this any longer, So now it's like everybody that you wrestle is like the best guy you wrestled in high school. So a lot of it is just like you have to help them develop awareness, because it's just the ego, the emotions, that just kind of clouds your thinking. And so if you help them have a clearer mind, um, then that goes a long way.
Mhm. What was the hardest jump for you? Was it middle school to high school to college, college to international?
Oof, they were all hard. I think high school to college. I remember thinking when I got to college, like I was excited to go Division 1. Like I remember thinking like, if I could start one day, that'd be great. And then obviously I kept getting a lot better, but my first year I took some I, I didn't I think I was 0-5 when I started out, and that was tough, and thinking like, had some thoughts of, am I cut out for it? Can I keep doing it? And then you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and got better. But then college to international was kind of tough because that was the first time that really, up to that point, everything I did was awesome. Like everybody was like, "Oh my God, you never won a state title and you're doing this." And then I won
Mhm.
nationals and went undefeated my senior year and won NCAAs. And then it was just like, oh, now you're supposed to win. I was in the U.S. Open Finals the next year, and it was like, just that it was the first time I had like real expectation, because it was so that was just a little bit different from like a mental standpoint. Because at Pitt at the time we were wrestling in the old EWL.
Mhm.
It's like we weren't on ESPN or anything. Like once I got good, I mean we didn't have many, like I didn't have many challenging matches throughout the year.
Right.
We do like the Cliff Keen would be hard, maybe over Midlands or whatever we would do. And then NCAAs, maybe one or two dual meets in there. But even NCAAs at the time, like my senior year, I mean, it was like the semifinals and the finals were hard.
Right.
The rest of it wasn't. So, um, yeah. And then you get to the international stage and the US Open, it's like second round, you got a guy that won nationals.
Yeah.
So, and then once, you make the team or you go overseas and now you wrestle these guys that, we're world champions and world medalists, and it's like I think that I just wasn't that was a adjustment period because it wasn't like I said. I mean, I might be wrestling somebody in college that on the weekend that I knew was going to be. I didn't have to be on for that one and still win.
Right.
Once you got good, where internationally you got to be on all the time.
All the time, from
Yeah.
whistle to whistle.
Yeah, so
It's
that was
like,
a little bit of an adjustment for sure. And the weight class thing was a big adjustment for me because there was no 79 kilo then, and that was
mm,
my weight. So I tried to make 74 kilo. I did that for a year, and that was really hard. And then I went up after that, but I was pretty small, so that was a challenge.
How
yeah.
did how did that mindset shift of having to wrestle with expectations translate both to your competitive career, but now that you're a coach, how do you take what you learned through your athletic career and help apply that to kids that you have on your team?
Yeah, well, as a coach, it's helped me because I've experienced like a lot of different sides of it. I experienced what it was like when nobody really expected me to do anything, and and still having to go out there and like having that expectation of yourself. It's like, no, I could do this. And then having the expectation of well, you're supposed to win, or if you win, but it wasn't by a large enough margin, it wasn't good enough. So I've experienced both of those, which I think has been beneficial in my coaching. So I'm able to help the guys through that, mentally, when no matter what side of that they're on. And then just again, like as a competitor, it was just being aware of it, of like this is just external. It doesn't have any it doesn't actually have any effect on my wrestling, So you felt it, but then it's like you just have to think through it logically. It's like this isn't like a real thing, that's going to affect me. So, um, just thinking in those terms. But you have it a lot as a coach too. I mean, it's like, it's coaching at Pitt is you get that like everybody says, we're in a hotbed or a good area. And so if we win, it's like, well, of course you should win. There's lots of good wrestlers around you, and it's like, well, it's not easy to win, so, and no matter where you're located, but, so yeah, you just kind of, you stay focused on what's real and then kind of avoid all the external stuff.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to get to our sprint here. Trying your best not to think about these answers. Just fire away.
Okay.
First one. What is the best wrestling shoe of all time?
Oh man, I'm not a fashion guy, so I don't know. I always liked the ASIC Kale shoes. I
Oh,
thought they
really?
were comfortable. Yeah,
Those
yeah,
are pretty good shoes. Those are pretty good
yeah,
shoes.
yeah. I
Funny.
always wore those, especially like at the end of my career. I felt like I was always wearing those.
They're pretty good shoes. All right. Give us a book recommendation. Best
Ooh,
book you recommend right now.
man, there's some good ones, but I'll say this one. There's a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello, just because we were talking about how it's helpful to have good awareness, and I probably read that multiple times a year.
Good. I like that one. I'm
Mhm.
gonna have to write that one down. All right. You only get four. They got to be American.
hmm
Who is on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
I think you'd have to Dan Gable,
Mm-hmm.
John Smith,
Mm-hmm.
Kale,
Mm-hmm.
and then Burroughs, Jordan Burroughs for
The
sure.
only answer, sir. The
Yeah.
only answer. I'm making t-shirts. It's
Yeah.
Gable, it's John, it's Kale, and it's JB. And the
Yeah.
answer is
I think
I mean,
just in
that's
the
it.
impact of the sport,
Exactly. He
it's
said the correct word as well, the word
yeah,
impact,
yeah,
full on impact of the sport. Yeah, and you got to be around Kale and you got to be around Burroughs quite a bit. I
yeah.
don't know about you. I can't say enough about JB about like what he's done for this sport over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah, I think he still doesn't get it. Like, obviously, his accomplishments are amazing, but he brought us through the dark days, man. I was on those teams,
I remember
we were wrestling them,
2010,
and
and I got up and I
yeah,
watched every single doggone match, and we didn't get a medal, and I was
yeah,
like,
yeah. 2011, Jordan started winning right away. I remember
yeah.
his first trip. We were in Ukraine, and it was like Zeke would always bring us out there to train like a while early, and he was just smashing people in practice. And I remember I was like, I wonder if he's gonna do that in competition, He
As
just
it turns
by the
out,
end of that tournament, everybody had their camera phones out, just
yeah.
taking videos of him. Like people already knew what we were
But
seeing.
that's the other thing. Like people don't recognize like Sargouche he was supposed to be the next dude, right? Like
Yeah.
he had won one already. Like they
hmm
were giving him that title. And for Jordan to go out there and beat him was unbelievable, especially in 2011. Obviously, we
hmm
know what Jordan became, but just kind
Yeah.
of being around that, it must have been pretty exciting, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he did it in a time, like you said, like there wasn't we weren't getting a whole lot of medals back then. So we didn't, he had to have the confidence to just go out there and do that straight out of college is impressive. And obviously we had other, Terrell was getting medals, Varner won the Olympics. And so, Metcalf was on like every single team forever,
Yeah.
so we had some really good guys too, but Jordan was, kind of broke through for
Yeah,
everybody.
pretty interesting, man. All right. Last one. You have a magic wand. You get to wave it and change one thing about the sport of wrestling.
Mm.
It changes tomorrow. What would it be?
Uh, man. All right, I'll do one. This is for me, not for the actual growth of wrestling. All
Okay.
right. So I would just get rid of like I just want to see what would happen if you just didn't have all these rules, in wrestling. Like just stop calling the doing the counts for stalling. If you like if the guy wants to run around the mat, the whole time, let him do it and see if the other guy can catch him. You know what I mean? I just want to see like what would happen in that way. And I feel like that's like just in a purist form of wrestling, like as a martial art, let's
Mhm.
see what happens and certain things. Because we do a lot of like in the name of we're trying to make it exciting, and I get that, but also what I'm saying is extreme, but we also do a lot of we overcomplicate things. And
Sure.
so like if we could simplify it, not to the extent that I just said, but simplify it in a way where um, someone could watch it and know what's going on. I think that would help our sport. So I
You
guess
ever
I am
try-
talking a little bit about growing the sport, but me personally, I just am interested in like, you know, um, if the guy's stalling and you can't score, maybe your offense isn't good enough. Let's just get better at it, right? And I think that would
100%.
ultimately help the actual skills of the sport develop. But I
Do you
get
know
that would
anybody
be
that
very
doesn't know
boring
anything
for the
about
average
wrestling?
fan. What's that?
Do you know anybody that doesn't know anything about wrestling? Because I don't know many.
That doesn't know anything about wrestling?
Yeah.
Do I know like a person in my life that doesn't know anything?
Yes. Like a
Yeah.
person that you speak to on a fairly consistent basis.
Yeah, my wife is clueless.
Okay. Have you ever tried to explain Greco to her?
No.
It is a doggone near impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being a little exaggerating. She's not
No, but
clueless, but she would have no idea about Greco.
no.
No.
Explaining so what my kid is
Mm-hmm.
in high school
Mm-hmm.
and she's watching the matches at Fargo. She's like, why can't they touch the legs? I'm like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
She's
It's
like,
it's hard to explain, right?
right. And then
Well,
you're
in,
like,
in
she's like,
college
well,
wrestling, like all the stuff that we do, that's like, wait, why do you get a point for that? And
right. And
what's he counting
she'll go,
for
why is
now?
that guy going down? I'm like,
Yeah.
the ref doesn't like him. Like, that's the only thing I can come up with. The ref
Yeah.
doesn't like him.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. I also think like going back to the saying like you got to treat it as a martial art. Just from a marketing perspective, I think that would help us a little bit of
I
like
agree.
saying that this is
It
what
would,
because we always talk about trying to be like, oh, we gotta be like a big boy sport. It's like, why don't we just be ourselves,
yeah.
and stop trying to be like football or baseball and we're a combat sport, we're a martial art. Let's embrace
Yeah.
that.
I also think like you said, okay, if we did away with stalling, it doesn't exist anymore,
Hmm.
right? And somebody decided that they were gonna score one sneaky, easy takedown in the
Hmm.
first period and just run like
Hmm.
hell for the other 6 minutes and 30 seconds. That creates drama. That creates a bad guy.
Yeah.
That creates there's so from a marketing angle,
Yeah.
I could do so much with that. I could do
Yeah.
look at
I
this
mean,
guy.
it would probably be incredibly boring to watch. So I'm not
I don't
saying do
know. I
that,
don't
but
know.
maybe not, maybe not. But it's I was just interested to see like I wonder what would happen, like what would how would we figure that out, And I think that yeah, so I'm not saying that we got to do that on the in wrestling, but it would be for my own personal enjoyment. I would like to see it.
Dude, maybe it's like the little bit of anarchist in me that wants to see let's just see what happens. I would 100% I'd be in. I'd be 100.
Yeah, I'm like that too. I'm not a big rules guy, which is funny because I'm on the rules committee for NCAA wrestling, but and I'm not suggesting any of these. So I'm a reasonable rules committee member.
Fair enough.
It would
But
certainly take all the or a good percentage of referees and bad referees out of the equation if there were a lot
Yeah.
less rules.
well, honestly, here's the thing. Like everybody say, just call more stalling, and it would be better. That is true. That would be better, but it's also not going to happen. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
that's a fantasy.
I agree. All right, Keith Gavin, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for giving us some time, brother.
All right, appreciate it. It's fun.
Take care, guys. Wait, don't go anywhere before you hit that next button. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.